Hello lovely people, I'm K3N and welcome to my channel. This is the next video in the series Slow Stitches, and I want to talk about cross stitch. Now cross stitch is most associated with counted cross stitch, you know, when you use the canvasy stuff. What's it called? Aida. And you build up pictures. You can either do it kind of to your own design as you go along, or you can buy kits with the charts and all that. I've done a few of those in my time. But I use cross stitch in many different ways. I mean, I make just normal crosses, like, for example, here on this little bag, which you've seen before if you've watched any of my other videos. There's one cross, which is red, in the middle of all the blue. Get your hands out the way, Catherine, so they can see. And you see that really stands out. That's really striking. It's kind of a statement stitch, if you like. So that's a cross with the, you know, diagonal. I'll do a bit of stitching in a minute to show you what I'm talking about. I'm sure you know, but you know. I felt it was important to include it because it is a stitch I use a lot. On this little bag, this other little bag here, I've done, this is also cross stitch, but instead of the kind of conventional diagonal crosses, I've done a line of running stitch all the way around the edge, but I've spaced them out somewhat, and then I've gone back over and crossed my running stitch with a stitch the other way. So you see that's just a different look. I mean, it's still a cross stitch, but it's a different look from the conventional cross stitch. And that's the only cross stitch he's got. Oh, sorry, he's got something rattly in him. On my famous sewing pouch, again, I've done here the same orientation of crosses, and what I've done here, I can see by looking at the direction that the stitches go in, is I've made lines of running stitch all going in this direction, and I've staggered them. So where the stitch is here, I've made the space of the next line and so on. And then I've gone back afterwards and crossed every stitch by a running stitch the other way. So that's kind of an organised version of what I've talked about before in the running stitch video. You know, when you just do running stitch that way and then running stitch that way and let it cross or not. So this is kind of controlling the crosses, and you get a much more uniform look. I think I've done it on the back, yes, on this little corner here I've done the same thing. You see, so the action of doing it is lovely and zen and slow stitchy because you're just concentrating on making your lines and your spacing, and then you go back and cross the other way. I find that a more fluid way of doing it than making each cross individually, which feels like, I'm trying to put it into words, feels like individual stitchy steps rather than a journey. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So that's using cross stitch as a decorative. Well, it's always decorative, but you know. On this little journal, I've used the diagonal, you know, the normal kind of cross stitches on the edges where I've stitched. Actually, because this was denim and it was denim with lycra in, I pieced it. I sort of did the assembly on a sewing machine. So then I've gone over all the edges with different stitches, and here I use cross stitch to decorate the edge. And if I show you the back on that diagonal there, I've also used cross stitch to decorate the edge. Now again, because it's important to me that the process, that the journey that your thread makes across the cloth as you're working, I don't usually do what you do if you do counted cross stitch, which is you make all your diagonals going one way and then you come back and make all your diagonals going the other way. Does that make sense? I do, when I'm doing this, I do each stitch at a time. So I do diagonal and then cross him. So anyway, as if, I hope you think this is important. I think it's important, otherwise I wouldn't be talking about it. It's just little details, you know. So what it means is each diagonal goes in an opposite way, the understitch to the overstitch. Do you see what I mean? So if you make all your right to left diagonals and then come back and make all your left to right diagonals, you get a different look to if you just make each stitch and the diagonals go whichever way they go, depending on which way you stitch them. I feel like I'm, you know, talking nonsense, gibberish, but I hope you know what I mean. But anyway, if you just kind of look at that line there, where I've done them however they turned out, And then if you look at this line here, which is quite graphic because it's very dark, on this one I've done them properly in inverted commas. So I did all my diagonals, all my right to left diagonals, the whole line, and then I came back and went the other way. And to me, at least, maybe it's just me, this one here looks more like little diamonds in a row rather than this one here where you kind of see each individual cross because your eye is slightly distracted by the fact the diagonals are different. How long can I witter on about cross-stitch? Anyway, all that just to say, it's not only the finished stitch that's important, it's how you make it. Kind of how you make it becomes visible in the finished stitch, is my point. Anyway, so here's another example of one cross on its own, suddenly jumping out at you in amongst all the other running stitch, seed stitch and vertical stitch that's going on around it. It really goes, whoa, hello, I'm here. It's like X marks the spot. So that can be a real, feature that you can put in some work if you feel it's a bit bland. Just put a cross in here and there. Here on this little piece of crochet scrap, I used the diagonal cross stitches to hold the piece down here, and then in between the little gaps I did the kind of, horizontal vertical type crosses in the gap. So 2 types of crosses in one little area. So just to briefly show you what I'm talking about. So if I was to do a line of cross stitch here, people who do, nice, neat, lovely embroidery often will draw two parallel lines to work within, but I don't do that. So if I was going to make all my diagonals going that way first, it feels awkward, but no, I come towards me. Hang on, I have to think about how I do it. It's funny, when you do it, you just do it, but when you think about it. So I'm going to make my diagonals all going this way first, so like that, and then I'll kind of visualise that I'm going to come here, and then I'll go like that. And I just want to do 3 or 4 just so I can show you on the back. Trying to keep, this is not how I'd normally stitch, but I want you to see what I'm doing. So if I go like, let's make this the last one, so I'll come up here. Again, you're sort of always visualising in advance where your next stitch will be. So you see I've got somewhat even diagonals going like that. Then what you see on the back is, ignore that, that was me jumping over, lines of running stitches all going the same way. So then you turn and come back the other way and finish that line off. So you go into that space of that one and you come out there. Whoops. And then you just do that all the way along. So in terms of stitching, you're making the same movement every time, in a different place. So you see even that little line now, to me again, looks like the little boxy diamondy things that you get on there. So if I was just to do it in a kind of random way, if I just, decide, right, I'm going to make some cross stitches here, then I might go like this and like that. And you see if I come out there now, I'm making this diagonal, but he's going to be underneath. So then I might turn it and go, just depends where I'm going. So it's just, pay attention when you're stitching to what you're doing and how it looks. That's the 2 important things. And you see already, to me, those 2 look much more like 2 crosses. The crosses are more important than the spaces, whereas in this the spaces seem to be, And to do the straight crosses, I would just then do, again, concentrating somewhat on getting the stitch and the space relatively the same distance apart. And then you need to leave yourself some room in between because you want to make your perpendicular stitches to make the cross. Turn around. I'll just do a couple because you're probably all asleep already anyway, having listened to me witter on about. And then just cross over them the other way. And this as well, you could make your crossover stitch roughly the same size, so you get a sort of symmetrical cross. But you could also just do you know, almost a teeny tiny little stitch like that. And it's still a weeny cross, but it's more of an anchoring stitch over the one you just did. Or you could do, I don't know, just play. Do it big one side and small the other. See how that looks. You see, so you get more like that kind of cross, like shaped like a T. So just play with it, you know, just try and think outside the cross stitch box. I've got my tail stuck now because it's too short. Just think of it in terms of what the words mean. It's crossing a stitch rather than cross stitch associated with counted cross stitch. I guess that's the point really of my ramblings and witterings. So anyway, I hope that was somewhat interesting and somewhat useful, and thank you very much if you've lasted this long, and I look forward to seeing you next time for more cloth tales. Bye bye.